Hi, my name is Angela O'Neill, and welcome to Stories in Progress. Stories are told in so many ways, through a book, a song, a play, a painting on a canvas, or a coffee with friends. So this is a place for stories to be told, stories from the past, and stories that are still in progress. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I have that on too. So if Lancome wants to sponsor this and CoverGirl,
Lancome and CoverGirl, we're here for you.
this podcast, that would be great.
Yeah.
We'll wear your stuff. It's great. It's fine.
Yes, that's right. We're like real life users.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will now start officially. Okay. Hey, everybody. This is my good friend, Erin, here for the podcast. We are basically just having coffee with each other right now. So cheers to our coffee. Since we are no longer in the same state, we get to have we still are creative and having coffee together and recording our conversation.
I really did not believe you when you said you were moving because we don't have to get into the details, but it happened so
let it go. Let it out.
Well, it just happened so quickly. And I realized that because when things happen quickly, you can't give all the details when they're happening because you don't know if it's happening.
Right.
But then when it did, I was like, no. I don't know. There's all those stages of grief. I think I was in denial for a real long time on that.
Yeah.
And then I think I was still in denial when you actually moved. It's like,
it didn't happen. No, yeah, she's coming back. Yeah, John and I were just talking about that the other day because when we moved, he moved before me. Everything was fine. Like, we're fine. We moved across the country together. We're okay. But
isn't today your wedding anniversary?
Today is our wedding anniversary. 9 years married, 10 years together.
Wow, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah, everything's good, everybody.
Everything's great. But you were kind of part of the process like we told you we were thinking about it. We told you where we were thinking of moving. That wasn't where we moved at all. But we were just talking about it the other day because John, he like, it was almost like he did move before me, which meant his heart was further along than my heart of talking about it. And posted it on social media like the day that he drove. And then I told him just recently, and I said, and I was the one who got the phone calls from people because I didn't do it yet. And my heart wasn't there yet. It still took me like, I don't know, 2 months before I finally said it on social media, or even to like the arts ministry people. I had the hardest time going, no, it's not the right time to talk about it right now. No, it's not the right time to talk about it.
Yeah.
And finally, I felt like God was saying, so you should talk about it before you like just move. And
I mean, it's a good thing to have such a strong community that you don't want to leave, but also have that God-given conviction that this is the time to leave, and there are going to be new roots to put down and in your new home. But I think there are worse problems to have than to be missed and to miss.
There are, and it is a blessing. Both of those are blessings, right? When something is hard to do because you're going to miss someone, that's a blessing because those people, and that will always be hard. Doesn't necessarily get easier. That's why we just are trying to convince everybody to move with us. John and I don't do that ever, right? We never.
No, you guys are so chill.
We're so chill about things.
Never try to persuade anyone of anything.
Because John's also, he wants all his people together. So if he likes you, he does want you to join the team or move with him or us.
Yeah, just by entire block.
Oh my goodness, don't tease me with a good time. We would have, okay, so come visit and we'll paint the dream.
Oh, I definitely want to visit. When we were off recording before this, we were talking about the fact that I am an introvert. Mm-hmm. And so I need to surround myself with fun and extroverted people. And that makes me more fun to be around them. So I actually have never been. I don't know if I can do that. I've never been. And I am a country music fan. I love to hear live music. I love to get glitzed
Ugh,
up and dressed up. Like I love all of that. But
this is,
I'm like, I need an emotional support person.
I'll be it.
you,
Yes.
you need to be my golden retriever and
Oh,
be
yes.
happy and show everything that's fun and just drag me along with you and I will have a great time. I love it.
Yes. And then, but that's like daily life is the sparkle and the glammed up. And then also there's a great balance of chill kickback, but, um, and country music when we were talking before. Welcome everybody to our pre-conversation. I just went to a 90s cover night, 90s country cover night. Now, like to be fair, I am not a country music fan,
I won't
but
hold it against you. Go
I
ahead.
know, and that's what everybody says. I
Yeah.
think I'm like finding my way. I think I
It's
have to
pretty
find my way.
theatrical.
It is very theatrical, and the stories are good.
Mhm.
And so,
And the community is good.
oh, they're so good.
You're
So
going to come
this,
around. You're going to come around.
well, I think this night helped. This was even like non-country stars were singing. So Bart Millard from Mercy Me, and which was a blast. He was absolutely hilarious. Had me cracking up at his intro. Um, but I was telling you, the guy, oh gosh, I can't even think of his name, which is really sad. And I don't know that it will ever stick. I think he will always be Deacon Claiborne from the show Nashville. Was one of like this was a night where I felt like there was a Mary Poppins bag, and each person that stepped out, it was like, like in a small, intimate, like we were not in a big, I was front row at the table right there, and Deacon Claiborne was there, and I just about lost it. I thought like, well, now I'm starring in the show Nashville.
You guys are pretty much best friends.
We pretty much are. And
As soon as
he's
he realizes it,
I
done.
well, yeah, I think it was like the start.
He already knows. You're having brunch on
We're
Saturday.
having brunch on Saturday. Yeah, it's gonna be great.
I'm just going to
When I show up, it won't be
steal food
scary or
over his
anything.
plate. It's a whole thing. Hmm.
But such a performer. I was dying. And as a performer, like my heart gets so happy. And that's what this town is. Artists that love what they do and they love being with each other. Artists having a good time gets my heart going because then I want to play. Like I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for the invite. That's why I'm
Like,
getting
I've
like
got
I have to
my
go front row
triangle
so that
ready,
yeah, so
the
that
tambourine.
yeah, I'll do the egg shaker. Whatever. But
The rainbow
I
xylophone.
yeah.
Like the Jimmy Fallon band, they use that.
Oh my goodness. These people with the Jimmy Fallon band would be a blast. Yeah. So I do. I have to sit front row now so that they feel the energy and the vibe and they go, "Oh,
It's her. I've been waiting for her
we've
my
been
whole
waiting."
life. It's my bestie.
Yeah. Yeah. They just don't know it yet.
Fair. That's fair.
So, all right. Well, there we go. Erin, we're gonna have fun today. Well, we already are, which
I'm here
means
for it. I love it.
everybody else is gonna have fun too. But let's take a minute and so we're gonna talk today about community, like how we met and like the importance of that community, because we had a really fun small group community that we were part of. We're going to talk about my book, which is coming out tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, it's so exciting.
I can't believe it. And then we're going to talk about you and your speaking and your heart for getting books into the hands of children. It's like at an early age to just the simplicity behind reading a book to a child at night and building their vocabulary and your social media is so much fun. We will put it in the show notes so that people go check you out. But yeah, let's start with how we met.
Okay. I've been thinking about this.
Okay,
I think I have the details down, but our
great.
friendship is one of those things that I feel like I've just known you forever.
I know it
So
does.
to ask, like, when did you guys meet? I was like, oh, okay. So I'll say what I think
Yeah,
happened.
great.
And if you have different, you can interject.
I think
So
it's
I
the same.
think this was the summer of 2019. Does that track with you?
It is the summer of 2019. Yes.
2019. So we're almost 6 years into this thing, which seems odd.
Like it's
It's like what
longer.
married couples say. It
Right.
feels like 5 minutes and it feels like 50 years at the same time.
Right.
So yeah, so we met at the summer Bible study.
Hmm.
So what happened was I had just I had just finished facilitating a rooted group. And I think some more churches are doing it, but basically what rooted is it's a 10-week course
Hmm.
where you deep dive into theology and into what scripture says about some of these bigger items like um, who
Prayer.
Jesus is, and yeah, prayer and tithing and community,
Hmm.
and goes through all of these things, and you become very close, not just with the Lord, but with those people
Hmm.
within the group too. And if you're facilitating it, there's just a really cool invitation to see the Lord work into people's lives, like people that maybe started off with crossed arms and like, I don't know what this is, and I don't even know if I want to be here.
Hmm.
And then at the very end are just so like literally open-handed in prayer and in worship. And it's just a very cool experience. It's also a little bit of an exhausting
Yeah.
experience too.
Yeah.
But my group and I became very close, and we wanted to do the summer Bible study together.
Hmm.
And they asked if I wanted to be a table leader. And now usually I'm a pat me on the back and tell me I'm pretty and I'm there. I'll say yes to almost anything.
Yeah.
But I just felt the nudge of the Lord saying, no, this isn't your time to lead it. You're going to receive. You're just
Yeah.
gonna go and receive. So okay. So it wasn't assigned seating. And I think at that point, our group from Rooted was maybe 12 to 14. So it was
It
a
was big.
significant, it was a big group. And we all were under the impression that we were just going to sit at the same table, which we
Yeah.
tried to do. I think that there were 8 to 10 seats at the table, and somehow we found other chairs and tried to make it work.
We did because we squeezed it in for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, no, this is before I came to you. This was before.
Oh.
Yeah. This is where I'm getting
Oh.
to. Oh, yeah.
Oh, never mind.
Huh?
Okay.
And so, rightfully so, the person who was in charge is like, so yeah, you doubled the table. You took seats from other chairs from other tables.
No shame.
Yeah. So I can't even, we might not have doubled it, but she needed at least 2 or 3 of us to move to a different table. But it was like crickets. Like all of us were like, no, we want to be together. Like we can't do this. So the other facilitator and I were like, well, I think we're going to have to take one for the team. Like, no one is moving. And so we get up and we go to a table near the front, which is not something I would normally do. But at this point, because we'd been doing our nonsense of making such a huge table in the back, everybody wants to sit in the back because we're all afraid. So we go toward the front. The one person who's not afraid to sit in the front, as we've already established with you and your bestiehood in a small venue, is you.
Yeah.
So I sit down at the table and you are the table leader. I think that is the origin story of this.
It is the origin story for sure. I don't think I knew all the details though, which is so fun. Um, and that was my first time getting involved at in the women's ministry, which I don't know. So I'm an extrovert, which it's I think sometimes seems like, oh, it's just easy to always go do the things, but it took like a step of faith to suddenly be in a room full of women that I didn't know. I wasn't new to the church because John and I had been married for a while, but I was teaching at the time in Corona at a Christian school, and so like I feel like at that moment I was like where I was doing ministry was in Corona more than, and I did stuff with John at the church, but this was the go. I felt the nudge, and so I called Carmela, who was the. At, do you hear Molly barking right now?
I don't.
Great, great. Well, just so you all know, my dog is barking right now. Um, Zoom does this great thing and like takes it out, which is crazy.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'll just keep going. Like she's not even barking. Um, anyways, so like the stepping out in faith and going, okay, she said yes. She was so welcoming for me to get involved, and that was the next thing. Was the women's Bible study, and I think you all kind of knew each other at the table though from MOPS, didn't you? Or did you not know the girls?
At least four of us knew each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I was nervous at first. Because it was oh my gosh, they all know each other. What am I gonna, all the questions.
No, this is actually really fascinating because you and I have not talked about this
Yeah.
before. So, what is happening here is I usually say yes to this, and I
Mhm.
said no.
Uh-huh.
This is the first time you've said yes to this.
Uh-huh.
I'm usually the nervous ball of energy because I overthink everything when it comes to social
Yep.
interactions. You're
And
saying that usually that's a little bit easier, but because you didn't know anybody, now you're nervous. This is so
yeah,
interesting
we
that this is
flipped.
how our friendship formed, is that we kind of took on each other's roles for the first meetup.
And that's what led it to it because had you not said no, or
Right.
had you said yes, then you would have been at a different table.
Right.
And had I thought, well, I'm happy, I'll just not. Like I'm
Right.
satisfied with doing ministry and connecting where I'm doing it and not listen to that little nudge, then the easier thing would have been to not. It's
Right.
summer vacation. I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. Yeah. Especially to facilitate, which is what you're doing as a teacher all year
Yeah.
long with the high schoolers, to then, you're right. You finally have your summer vacation. You're like, I'm going to sign up for this in
Right.
a room of people I don't know, in a
Right.
ministry I haven't served before.
Yeah.
Well, that's very fascinating. There we go.
See, we're learning the details now.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
from there, gosh, our friendship blossomed, which was just beautiful. Um, Erin, you were on my launch team. You've had a chance to read some of Unspoken Word, which is coming out. Well, probably when this airs, we will be past tomorrow. But as we are talking right now, it is coming out tomorrow. When I pressed submit on the publishing tool, I went, well, what am I supposed to feel right now? I just pressed it's so much work, and then you press a button.
You're like, where's the confetti
I know.
poppers?
I think I needed
Where
a
are the
confetti
dogs with
cannon.
top hats? Like,
Yeah.
wow.
But I think for sure tomorrow I will feel that it's real a little bit more, and then when I see it in other people's hands besides just
Mm,
mine. But um, let's talk a little bit about it. And this
yeah.
is fun. So I've had other guests on, and I had a few friends, performer friends, do a table read so I could hear the spoken word. Unspoken Word, One Moment with Jesus Changes Everything is the book. It's a dramatic, um, theatrical take on scripture, not in like going off into la la land with it, but taking scripture, and then one of the aspects is having a monologue through the eyes of the person for anyone who hasn't been following or doesn't know. And so anyways, but today is almost I told you like let's talk about whatever chapter you want. This is a little like surprise for me too, which is fun. I like that. Like there could have been a hey, let's talk about chapter 3, but this is different than any other uh episode because we're just going to talk about the book in whichever chapter you'd like. So this is a little surprise for me also.
Yes. So actually, I have some initial questions for you, if you
Oh,
don't mind.
great. I love questions.
Okay. So obviously, you have a background as a music theater student and then as a teacher and director. And at the very beginning, you give a really good prologue about these are some of the terms that we
Yeah.
use in this book. So my question for you is, do you have in mind either a very specific group of intended audience or a couple different groups of
Mm.
who would read this book, and what your pie in the sky hope is that they would use it
Mm.
for?
So, yes, honestly, one of the there's one way to write a book where I've heard where it's like you're thinking of the exact person in your head that it's a woman in her 30s who has a family and that's like my target audience. And when I was talking with my editor, um, I think at one point I had even said, I probably women's ministry is where it'll land. And if I speak, that's probably where I'll go. And he quickly said, no, it is not
Mm.
just a women's ministry book. And I think I didn't necessarily want it. And I don't want to say just because but, um, anyways, I think in my mind I knew that I didn't want to put it in that box only. It could be used in that box. But he said this is not just in that category. This is something different. This could, and so it widened the scope. I think like my youngest reader is probably a high schooler, and maybe maybe a high schooler who, well, I don't even want to say just in the theatrical world. That was the other thing. I did not want it to just be a bunch of theater artists who thought this was cool and picked it up because they could identify. And at the same time, I like that's a really great space where that person might want to take one of the monologues and go perform it at their church, which is really cool too. Um, so my reader and intended audience grew to kind of your just mass. Like I want this in my heart of hearts. My hope is that this book for a Christian, however long you've been a Christian, wherever you're at in your walk, whether male, female, teenager, or 100,
Mm-hmm.
that this would be a book that um, brings Jesus to to life. I don't want to say differently, but maybe reminds us of these moments, reminds us even that these people, it's what it did for me. It reminded me that these people were people. The Bible can seem like a 2,000-year-old book, and we forget that they were real people back then who just like we're taking steps of faith, they took steps of faith, and didn't know the outcome necessarily. Even with Jesus there, like there's a hope. Like I think you can heal. Can you heal me kind of a thing, and or in the different moments, or the little boy with the lunch, here's my lunch, like I don't know, have it. And
Yeah.
so my hope is that Jesus comes to life, which he did for me. I saw his intentionality in such a beautiful way, which then even in this move to Nashville, some of the things I feared personally, watching how he met those needs, I could then go, oh my goodness, he is still so intentional. I'm his child that he knows. Um, and yes, it was a step of faith, but how he met us in that was so beautiful. Um, and then to know, yeah, so to bring his intentionality and then the humanity of the experiences to life. So there's that. And then at the same time, my hope is that if a non-Christian were to pick this up,
Mm-hmm.
that suddenly the the Bible can seem like an intimidating book to open. And where do you start? And what do you do? And what does it mean? I don't understand. It can be that way for Christians too. And so, but my hope is that the same thing would happen for someone who's not yet a believer, and if they're wondering, like, is this Jesus guy for real? Is he that suddenly they would see, yeah, he's for real. He was for real then, and he's for real today, and he's for real for you in the same way. So I know that gives me like a wide audience, which was just a different approach, kind of. Okay, so then you asked, what is my like hopes and dreams? My hopes and dreams, I would love for like one for small groups to do this together. There's a beauty in doing it together, and even a challenge in the book. If you're doing this in a small group, I challenge you to, even if it's not comfortable, have someone each week read through, kind of perform the piece, because something happens when you hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would love for churches to do it. Like even, and this would be going to that. niche of like a worship arts ministry to do it and remind them about, not remind them, but have this storytelling experience of the Bible, which then could maybe even reflect in their worship services, or just or is a reminder we are telling the story of Jesus. That's what we're here as we lead people to Him. And then, like dream, there is the performance aspect of it, and so as I've had a chance to have friends read pieces, um, if I'm dreaming big, like what a cool thing it would be to have this performed at churches
Mhm.
as it's as a special night or as a different kind of a sermon, or at the Bible Museum in Washington D.C. if you're listening, which would
Oh.
be such a cool way to bring the Bible to life. It's so simple. Like there, you just need the people and a space.
Well, yeah. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about, I can't remember the name of it, but they do it out in Laguna Beach, and I'm sure they do it in a bunch of different areas too. But when they do the festival of bringing the paintings to life,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's something like that where it's almost immersive and either a walkthrough or there's a
Yeah.
stage and people can see that you just have character coming out and
Yep.
performing this. And like you said, hearing it, because as I'm reading it, I've read it. I love it. It's a great book, everybody. Like
Thank
there,
you.
when I will go through it in a moment of all of the levels that it can fulfill you. But as I was reading, I realized, and I'm a pretty fast reader. I love reading, and I don't usually read out loud unless it's to my children and their books. But as I was reading your book, I found myself starting to say it out loud under my breath because I wanted to hear the rhythm. Because I started to hear it as I'm reading it in my head. I was like, oh, I want to hear it.
I
And so I
love
was starting
that.
to say it under my breath. So I think that you're definitely onto something that if a small group or a church does it, there is something very different about hearing it.
Hmm.
And now I'll make this quick because I don't want to take up too much of your time on this, but I do want to talk about my experience in reading the book and what I
Yeah.
think that it might do for people that don't love reading as much as I
Mm.
do, is that your ability to synthesize so much emotion and the plot and the context into the person's experience in their spoken word. It's not very long to read each of the
Mm.
testimonies in your spoken word. So if they just read or just heard that part, it's enough to give them
Mm.
knowledge about that person's experience with Jesus, that if they then read the context that you gave and then your experience with it, that's going to give them that seed of curiosity
Yeah.
from a very accessible place through the spoken word, whether they read it or they hear it, to then be curious, like, well, what was going on that made him feel this way? Or
Hmm.
where in the Bible is this? Or I maybe heard part of this story, but for example, I'll tell you, I'll let the cat out of the bag. We're going
Yeah.
to talk about the child, chapter 8.
Oh, yay.
So you referenced him actually already about the child who offered up his lunch. But for example, they might not know that Jesus that same day had just heard that his
Mhm.
cousin had been beheaded, that he
Mhm.
was trying to have a moment of quiet and solace and
Yeah.
solitude, but saw that so many people believed he was who he said he was and came to hear him and see him, and he showed compassion
Yeah.
and came down to be with them. They might not know the context of the disciples had been working with him all day during those miracles and that healing, that they didn't even have time to eat. Like that actually really stood out to me because as a mom of
Yeah.
little ones, we very rarely get to sit down or be quiet or feed ourselves. And so the disciples say to Jesus, um, we're just tired and we haven't eaten. And he tells them, okay, go on to the boats and go have, basically an Elijah moment. Go get your snack and your nap on, knowing full well that that's not what's going to happen. And so
Mhm.
now you have the context of really tired and hungry disciples. You have a heartbroken and yet completely compassionate Jesus who has
Mhm.
been performing all of these miracles all day long. And now they go off to what they thought was going to be a quiet, deserted area, and all of these people follow.
Yeah.
What are you okay if we get into it now?
I would love to.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh gosh.
Okay. So what I loved about the context that you gave in this book is you have all of this background and you have these hungry and tired disciples.
Mm-hmm.
You now have 5,000, probably the Greek word they think was they when they said men, they really did mean males.
And right.
So probably up to at least 20,000 were
Yeah.
probably when you account for the women and children, right? So you have these hungry, tired disciples, hungry, tired people, and they're in pretty much a deserted area. This isn't a bustling marketplace. And I love that you gave this background because now the question is, what are we going to do to eat?
Right.
And I love that you gave this background for the disciples to say, okay, well, it's time to go. Like that's the obvious logical choice is everybody needs to be on their own, go scatter and go find your food.
Yeah.
And you pointed out so beautifully Jesus's questions aren't
Mm.
because he doesn't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said that. It's not because Jesus doesn't know the answer. It's because his questions are an invitation to see what he's doing. Because I mean, how many times have you been given something that's a quick gift, like at Christmas time when we were kids, just get a quick gift and yeah, you're appreciative, but maybe not as appreciative if you had seen all the work that your parents went into
Right.
to earn the money, to go think about what you'd want,
Mm-hmm.
to go to the store, to wrap it. If you knew all of the steps it took, you'd have a greater appreciation for it. So Jesus is inviting the
Mm-hmm.
disciples into the steps of the
Yeah.
miracle so
Right.
that they can appreciate it more. And I love that you pointed that out in the context. And so he says to them, well, why don't you feed them? It's like, okay, so now we've had the practicality response of, well, we should just send everybody away. Now you're saying we should feed them. And so you have the context of we're in a deserted area. This isn't a bustling marketplace. So I love that you pointed that out. The second is, I think they pointed out it would cost 200 denarii. If we could, first of all, if we could even find the food, it would cost 200 denarii, which is 8 months worth of a normal income. So the
Mm-hmm.
disciples don't have 8 months worth
No.
of money on them. And also, even if we did, where would we go to find the food, to bring it back, and to properly distribute it?
Yeah. And prepare it and
And then you give us the response. Well, what do we have? And it's a little boy. And I love that you took on the little boy's perspective
mm.
because you definitely use syntax and excitement that a child would have. And that was such a smart. And actually, I'll stop myself from talking just a moment. What was your
Yep.
thought process in creating the voice of the child?
So this was one of the last chapters that I wrote. It was the second to the last one. And one of the values that I had on my heart was different perspectives. So when I was trying to figure out who was one of these last chapters, maybe another woman because there's a lot of men. And I have three women in the book, but maybe another woman. Like, let's think that's what and then I was reading through my journal and I had started something on this little boy. And I went, oh my gosh, there's not a kid. What other perspective uh than a kid? Like that's and literally like he's in one of the because this miracle is in all four gospel books. I think, I don't know for sure. I think he like the fact that it's a little boy's lunch shows up, I think, in only one. Don't quote me on that, but it's not like you have to find the one that talks about the little boy, and it's like blurb right there, little boy. And so, I can remember we were up in Arrowhead for the weekend after Christmas, and I went, okay. I went in this little writer's nook that I took on as my space. No one else was allowed. No, that's not true. Other people were allowed to, but I think people are afraid to come out. um, and honestly, writing for him was so much fun.
Mm.
Like I felt like if I'm remembering right, it was one of the easy writes because it just was like, oh, this is fun, and you kind of to take him on and for me as an actress to kind of go into like how would this play in a performance, it does have to sound and different, and then just that idea because childlike faith is in there also, that idea of in that chapter. Like, what if he was retelling this? And how many times does a child retell something and we go, "Oh, that's nice." You know, okay, like that's cute. And for him to be like, "No, no, like, oh, you're probably thinking this, but no, it's totally true." Um, it just was so full of joy. It is the chapter that brings so much joy. And
Mm.
so, yeah, there was joy while I was writing it. Other chapters, I was weeping while I was writing it because whatever perspective that was calling me to take on in that moment. So I really did try for all of them. Writing for Peter was like, okay, I got to be like a strong guy right now. I'm a fisherman. Um, don't worry, I didn't like get into fisherman costume or anything like that. None of that happened. But
You don't even like fish, so
I
yeah.
don't. I don't.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, anyways, yeah, in that chapter, it for sure was very joy filled.
Mm.
Um, and the awe and wonder was what needed to come out. Yeah, I don't
No,
know if
and
that answers
it
it.
definitely did. And I have a 6 year old son. So when you had him start with, okay, that is exactly how a kid starts their,
Yeah,
when they're really excited, like, okay, like, do I have your attention? Okay,
yeah.
because it's coming.
Uh-huh.
And they are aware. And it was kind of actually honestly convicting that they are aware when we don't believe them, or that when we're
Mm,
just placating,
hmm.
or we're just nodding our head and like, oh, I've heard this story before, or I
Yeah.
know where this is going. So I'm just going to kind of glass eye over and nod. It was very convicting. Like, you know what? They're much more observant than we give
Mm,
them credit for.
yeah.
And something I wrote down when I was reading your spoken word for this little boy was obedience when hungry.
Mm,
And I think that that could be literal. In this case, it was literal. The
yeah.
disciples are being obedient by following what Jesus is asking, like, go ask for what we have, despite the fact that that just seems like the most ridiculous request.
Right.
And also, he had just been performing all of these miracles all day. So I don't know, maybe have that mustard seed of faith that he's going to do something miraculous.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
also they're hungry and they're tired. And then you have this little boy who, as you pointed out in the book, the type of bread that he had would be indicative of someone who doesn't have much by way of
Hmm.
resources.
Yeah.
And he's hungry too. He wants to eat too.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just offer a piece or a sliver. He offers everything that he has, believing that if Jesus is asking for this,
Yeah.
he can have it. Whether
Right.
it's just for Jesus or just for a disciple, or if he's going to do something that I can't even imagine. But I think that what was so convicting about it, the way that you wrote it from this perspective of the little boy, is it didn't matter what
Mm,
the outcome was going to be. It was the belief that in Jesus's hands, it's better than in mine.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
loved that. Like that was just so obvious that, and he was excited about it, that he wasn't said like, oh, I felt the hunger pains, but I'm just hoping and I hope he does something good with it. It was like,
Right.
no, this is what's being asked for me, and whatever comes of it, come what may, because Jesus is in charge of it.
Right.
And um, I just love that obedience and hunger, and obviously there's that alignment of the bread of life. You know that he's literally
Mhm.
giving bread, but he is the bread, and that when we are hungry for something, where are we going to? Is it better in our hands or is it better in Jesus's hands?
Right. And how many times, even in writing that, because for sure, like the full conviction comes to the
Yeah.
writer. How many times do I go, okay, I see what you're asking for, but just in case, can I save a piece of bread or a fish for me?
Yeah.
Just in case.
Can I gather the manna
Hmm.
and
Right.
also keep a little on the side just in case to hedge my bets?
Just in case tomorrow's different.
Right.
Yeah. 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 And that was that was actually a fun conversation with Drew, my editor, of like, it's kind of like a band-aid, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is not as it is or as it was, this would not fix it. Just like a band-aid might give us a little covering, or a child that goes, the Band-Aid makes it better. Well, the Band-Aid's not going to make it better, but it feels better. But this fix in and of itself was not going to fix anything, but it's the hands that it was in that it was able to fix.
Yes.
Uh, so I don't know if you caught in the very beginning, like the boring part of the book, which is like the copyright and the table of contents. There's nothing great there other than it's copy. It has gone through the process and all of that. Uh, so I self-published, which meant I had to come up with a publishing company name. And I thought, well, what do I want it to be from here on out? If I continue on the self-publishing route,
Mhm.
what would I want that to be? And so the publishing company is Bread and Fish Publishing,
Love it.
a small offering that I'm just doing my part. And however God wants to multiply it, he can do that.
That's so smart. I love that. I love that. Hmm. So when you okay, so you said that the child was your either your last or second to last
Mhm.
chapter.
Yep.
Now, I didn't know that as the
Yeah.
reader.
Because
So
it's not the second to the last chapter.
no, it's not. And it also feeds so I mean it's within the Bible, it's chronologically the next, but it just fed so well then into Peter's
Hmm.
story of
Hmm.
walking on water.
Right.
So how did from a creative side, did that just feel like the missing piece that just landed right where it needed to go? Or did you have to rewrite portions of that Peter chapter? I think it's called the Bold, chapter 9.
Yeah, no, I didn't rewrite because so I had started the spoken word as a journal. A lot of it starts as the journaling kind of uh not doodles, but whatever the words are of doodling, like putting it together. So because I had so Peter's chapter, we'll go to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um so this was for me one of those like mind-blowing moments of, oh my goodness, this all happened in one day,
Yeah.
which so many times, and rightfully so, like a sermon on Peter walking on water is a big sermon just to take that portion. A sermon on Jesus feeding the 5,000 is a big sermon just on that. So I just don't think I had ever heard the whole and then the fact of the beheading of John the Baptist. That one was, and I read it over and over again. Am I reading this wrong? Am I reading this wrong?
Mm.
And even when I turned in the Peter chapter to my editor, who I picked someone who has his doctorate in seminary because I wanted to be checked.
Yeah.
Um, I handed it over, like email, but handed it over to him and was so nervous going, I've never heard all of this together. Am I just I don't think I'm wrong because literally, like, it just goes when you read the whole thing, you see it as this day. Um, which then adds so much more to the story when you do put them all together and at least like acknowledge the miracle that happened that same day and acknowledge the humanity of Jesus losing his cousin, that
Mhm.
human side of no, this was his cousin that prepared the way for him. Like this wasn't cousin that I've never met. This was we're like bound in ministry together even. Our births happened at so that's a whole other conversation. But um so Peter's was already done with the miracle of this, at least the acknowledgement of the miracle that happened that day with the feeding of the 5,000. I think then just knowing a child's perspective would be so sweet and different in the book. It's just also a blessing that like it happened that way because I could have picked a million Peter stories. There's so many to pick from. I don't even remember why I picked this one. To be honest, like looking back, I don't know what it was about this specific story that was Peter's, but it went so perfectly with it kind of goes into like it was a step-by-step journey, just like these were steps of faith for these people. This was a step-by-step of faith journey. And then looking back now with that question, thinking like, and then to know like God knew as it was
Mhm.
coming together. Because I didn't I didn't have him in there. And
That's so interesting because from when I read it, I also didn't know that that was all on the same day. I did know that Jesus received word about
mhm.
his cousin the same day as the 5,000 because I remember the desire for solitude because that's always going to stick out to me because I that's how I recharge is some solitude
Yeah.
and to be alone for a little bit. So that always stood out to me, but I didn't realize that then that night slash morning, because I think it was on the fourth watch. So maybe it was between, they're estimating between like 3 a.m. and
Yeah.
6 a.m.
The
Um,
darkest part of the night,
correct. Correct.
morning.
And I think that whether this was intentional on your part, but certainly on God's part in putting those two spoken words together in the context that you gave in the book as well, is that how many times have we said, if God would just perform a huge miracle, if
Mm,
he would just do this in front of me, I would believe forever. Like all I need is just proof. He can show this to me, and that's all I need for the rest of my life. I will follow him forever. And I love that you pointed out that this is in the same day because they didn't just get one miracle. They had seen him perform miracles all that morning, doing all the healings over the sick, and then feeds the 5,000. And not just for them to watch, they were part of it.
right.
They are
Right.
distributing the food, they are watching it continue to multiply. And then hours later,
Here we are.
literally dropped their faith.
Right.
And so I think it's just another response of like, you want to see things, you want to see the Lord perform a miracle because you think that is going to change your heart. But what is going to change your heart is to believe he is when he says, I am.
Yeah. Right. Right. 100%. And to remember, that was with the Annie F. Downs book that we did. What was it? Lovely, something
Looking
lovely.
for lovely.
Looking for lovely. It's that idea of if we are looking for lovely, if we're looking for if our eyes are open to how he is working and we don't just move on, but we think about um, the little and big things,
Mm-hmm.
um, to remember those. Like if we look for them and then to hold on to them, because storms, literal and figurative storms of life, are going to happen. So we're going to have great celebration, and then storms will happen, and so that's when those lovely moments matter a lot, is because we can hold on to them and know that the storm is there. Because I think for to say, and this was with Peter, the reminder of he's the one that we know had a wife. We don't really know that about any. So to think about that moment through like what the worry a husband would feel, or a spouse, either way, if you're in this life-threatening situation, like to think about, but then so easily that forgetting of what happened that day.
And
And
I
so if we
also
can
liked,
hold on.
yeah,
Yeah.
that you wrote in the spoken word that you just reminded me when you said, I don't know if I'm going to see my wife again. And these would be very real concerns. But what I also like that you wrote in that one was, I'm a fisherman and I'm
Yeah.
about to drown. Like, this is embarrassing. I should know better, kind of thing. And I think that that's so human too, that I
Hmm.
should be able to rely on myself, on my
Hmm.
own strength, my own talents, my own training. And
Yep.
I'm failing. This doesn't make sense. And I am embarrassed that this is how I'm going to go down when this is my profession. And it's just another good reminder of,
Yeah.
yeah, these are the talents and the training that's been given to you, but not so that you'll rely on yourself, but
Right.
so that you can use that for his glory because you believe he is the source and the sustainer of it.
Right.
I love that you pointed that out in his unspoken word.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and how many times do we or even go like, so you called me into this, or I followed in this way, and now like I'm gonna die on the sea. I don't understand. When we don't understand like the next step, but to know that he's still there even if we don't understand. And that was the beauty of that story, you know, so Jesus walks on water. They're like, ah, it's a ghost. And but then Peter, so I think Peter can get flack for his sinking moment,
Mhm.
but he also was the only one that like listened to the shepherd's voice and stepped out. Um, and at the same time, yes, just like we will kind of lose focus at times, how he sank, but Jesus was right there. And so I think that idea, it can be so easy for us to be like, I doubted, I was confused, I had a question, I'm grieving, and that's causing confusion in life. But to know like that's that's why the front cover is Jesus's hand. Like it is, he is still just there reaching for us, not condemning us amongst all of that. And Peter went on to do great things, like died for his faith, you know, was the rock of the church, you know, and so which is so comforting for us, I think, to see. And yet he did sink and he denied Jesus. Like there's all these things that seem like we're not going to come back from it, but that's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is just reaching his hand out.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Is there anything about this book that you want people to know that maybe you haven't shared yet?
Hmm. I want people to know no matter where you're at in life, whether you are the religious leader who we would all think should have the greatest faith. That's, you know,
Mhm.
Nicodemus is in the book. Um, and we don't know when Nicodemus officially like turned his belief, but we it scripture points to him eventually believing. He was on a journey and Jesus met him in the journey, right? Some people had quick faith. So whether you're a Nicodemus, a religious leader seeking, or an outcasted woman like the woman at the well, or so the final chapter I wrote was the prisoner, which is the final chapter in the book,
Mhm.
or the criminal. And that's the criminal on the cross, which culminates one moment with Jesus changes everything quite literally.
Mhm.
Like, and so, and as I wrote that chapter, I remember thinking, what if this ever were to land in the hands of someone who has committed a crime, who is in a prison cell? Is there a chapter that they would see themselves in? And maybe through some of the other words there, but um, yeah, that chapter actually wasn't supposed to happen. I was, I had 11 chapters, and my sweet husband, John, said 11 is a strange number for chapters in a book. And I said, well, I'm fine with it. I'm an artist. I'm okay with strange. And until God, like until there's another one that I know is supposed to happen, I'm great. This is fine. And then like a week later, this chapter played like a movie in my head, and which is what happens when I read or dream of a scene. And so I went up to John and I went, so there's 12 chapters now. But but it's not because you told me to do it. Oh, but he was right in his gentle way. He wasn't telling me to change it. He just said that's a different number for it doesn't seem complete. And
Mm.
it wasn't. Anyways, so my hope would be um because it's varying people and varying walks that are in here, it's not just all, you know, the Jewish people at the time. There's Roman figures in there. Like quote unquote enemies, that people would be reminded, one, that Jesus came for us all. When
Mm-hmm.
you think that he didn't come for you, that he came for you. It's a
Mm-hmm.
choice. Like one moment with Jesus changes everything, but there is choice in there. Some of these characters, we don't know the end of the story. We don't know the end of the story for Pontius Pilate. There's theory, and I think hopeful theory that people have, but we don't know whether or not he became a Christian. Um, so there's
We
choice in
should
that
do
moment.
another podcast at some point just on Pontius Pilate because I have so
Okay.
many thoughts about him. But
Okay. We'll do.
we already probably have to edit this one so much because we're talking so
I
much.
know.
But yeah, let's note that. Let's talk about Pontius Pilate for a while, some other time.
Okay. Hey, let's do it around Easter.
Done.
Scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so one moment, but it still is our choice. Like, what are we going to do with that moment? But I hope that people see that he came for everybody, um, and
Mm-hmm.
that he loves equally. And then on the flip side, I think it's what are we going to do with it? I don't even know if I'm answering the question anymore, but
There you are.
here we go. Someone asked me at one point, like, how's your walk with Jesus changed with this? Which was a really, really easy answer
Mm-hmm.
that I could go on for hours about. And then they said, and how have you changed? And I went, like, that's the what am I going to do with it question. Or am I going to just let this be a fluffy change in my, and I love Jesus more now, which is great and wonderful, and there's beauty in that. And Pontius Pilate, which we'll get more into that another time because that is a whole it's one of the most powerful ones for me, even in writing. I said, well, if Jesus can look at the person condemning him to death and have grace and love and know that his blood was for him, I should be able to look at people that same way.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't mean that I ignore pain or ignore hurt, but to also understand, even if I am being pained or hurt, that Jesus still looks at them with the same eyes he looks at, quote unquote, like Mary, who
Mm-hmm.
seems so innocent, and his mom, it's not different. His blood was not different for her than it was for Pontius Pilate. So, yeah.
I especially love that you chose that cover art with his hand reaching down and showing that it's still pierced for from what he did with us. But I immediately thought because last year at church, one of the Bible studies that we did was on Isaiah, and
Mm,
so immediately I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I get the verse right. It's Isaiah 49:16, and it was a prophecy of God speaking to his people. But it said, "Look, I have inscribed you on the palm of my hands." And when I read that the first time, and
mm,
I'd never read that before until this Bible study, when I read that, I immediately thought, "Oh my gosh!" When he was on the cross, our names were on the palm of his hand, and not just written down, and it's going to be washed away. It was engraved.
yeah.
And so when you're saying that everybody the blood was shed for everybody, it also reminded me that he already knew
Yeah.
who we are, who we were meant to be, what we were going to do to separate ourselves. And as he's exposing our hands on the cross, open armed, literally saying, if you believe in me, I will make the way back to the Lord
Right.
for you.
Right. It's all about that's what we need to do is believe. And then the rest is things will happen because of that belief. Like there will be evidence of our faith, but the redemption and forgiveness and newness comes not because of anything we've done, but everything that he has done. And that idea, someone brought this out in a conversation once, and I touch on it a little bit in on Thomas's chapter. Uh, the fact that Jesus's resurrected body had the scar still. We hear like when we go to heaven, we'll get our new bodies and there won't be cellulite and bumps
Yeah.
on our nose, or like I think of I've got an Italian nose, like my bump will be gone, or all the things
I
that
hope not. I like your face.
well, thank you, I've grown to love it. So my nose. But to think of his body, I mean, at least in that moment, to Thomas was imperfect with a scar
Mm.
where points towards his love, right? His love, like that scar was because of his love.
Mm-hmm.
So not imperfect and like a it's imperfect, it's perfectly imperfect. That scar represents everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. So the cover art was done by an artist that was part of the artist ministry that I led and was such a wonderful process for her. And gosh, I've heard over and over again as I've shared it with people how hard hands are to draw.
Yes, hands and eyeballs.
Yeah. And I don't know, that's not my art. Like I know how hard it is to hit that note. And when someone does that, I go, "Whoa," and they hold it for 5 minutes long. I can understand the depth and the hard task of that, but I don't know. I know it's beautiful to see. Um, but that's what everybody says is, "Oh my gosh,
Mm.
hands are so hard." And she captured it so, so beautifully.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking about the book so much. I love this. Okay, I do want to talk about you a little bit more.
We can do it like in 2 minutes because I
Okay.
really wanted to just
Oh,
celebrate
you're
this
the
book.
best.
I'm so excited that I got to talk to you literally the day before because now that we've mentioned her 3 times, I'll mention her one more time. Annie F. Downs,
Yeah.
her
She
podcast.
should listen now.
She should listen now. I know her ears are now definitely burning, and you're definitely getting coffee together tomorrow.
I believe it.
Uh, what she always says about her own books and then says to other people when she talks to them right before their book comes out is the night before you celebrate it because it's yours,
Mm.
and then the next day it becomes everyone's,
Oh, I like
and
that.
you surrender it over to the Lord with your name. Your publishing house name is very apt that you're offering it tomorrow, and whether he feeds 5 or 5,000 or 5 million, you just know that that mustard seed of faith is going to grow in ways that maybe you can't even imagine. And just like the little boy didn't know if this was for Jesus and only Jesus or a few men or somehow
Yeah.
this entire crowd. I just I just want to applaud you for your obedience,
Thank
and
you.
maybe find ways that this book is an example of obedience in hunger. That what you
Mm.
are hungering for from the Lord, He provided through this book, and is going to feed people in ways that are just going to be a blessing for His glory, and also that you got to be invited into it, and your yes is going to be met with well done, well
Thank
done.
you, friend. Thank you. Well, and celebrating with you today. This is a celebration. Like I feel like you're part of the quiet celebration right now.
Well, thank you for inviting me into it.
Yeah.
I'm just as pleased as punch to do it. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay. Well, as you all have heard, we've also said there will be a part two to this where we will talk about Pontius Pilate. I could
Yeah.
talk about Pontius Pilate a lot now, which never in my wildest dreams did I think he would be someone I would mention as much as I have. But that encounter with Jesus
Yes.
has meant a lot to me now. But let's talk a little bit more about you.
Okay.
I want you to share um, your heart for getting for books to be read to kids. And as you know, in the beginning of my book, I write like this storytelling journey started when my mom read stories to me, and then I became the reader because I'm a performer.
Yes.
So my first monologues were happening with little children's books, but uh, storybook basics. Yes, did I get it right? Okay, I was
Right.
making sure. Tell everybody just what you're doing with that to provide awareness and also like guided tool of here's some great books for kids and here's why.
Yes. So I'll give a long elevator pitch, but it'll be an
Okay,
elevator pitch
I
nonetheless.
love that.
So this will be like the Empire State Building pitch. How about that?
Yes, 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 yes.
Um, so as a believer, we know that the Lord has wired our brains for storytelling. that he wants us to know his story and our story within his story.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is why Jesus always told stories
Yeah.
to make us understand better, because he is the creator of our brain, so he knows how it works and he knows
Right.
what will land, and stories make sense to us. So keeping that in mind, and as a mom of two young ones, seeing how fast not only they grow up, but there's this saying that the days are long and the years are short. I understand what they're saying with that, but I also find the days to be very short. As far
Mm.
as, did I really connect with my kids today?
Mm.
We did a bunch of things, and there were a
Yeah.
lot of things on the to-do list. But as far as, did we make the time to slow down and really connect with one another? And I was finding my answer more often than not was not really.
Mm.
And there are so many apps that tell you you need this bell and you need this whistle, and this
Yeah.
is what's going to set them up for success. And the truth of the matter is, their brains are wired for storytelling and their brains are wired for bonding.
Yeah.
So you don't actually need to have a high budget for that, because it's with children's books.
Right.
And either children's books are priced pretty low as far as price points go, and they go on sale quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And also, society believes in a literate society and has funded libraries. So you can
Right.
get them for free. So
Right.
your budget's out. And then there's also another barrier of background. Either the pendulum can swing of, I don't really enjoy reading and I'm not really that well educated, so I don't really know what to do. And so you find paralysis in that and you don't do anything. Or the pendulum swings the other way. I'm so well educated and
Mm.
I'm such a bibliophile that I better create a protege.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go the other direction of too much pressure, trying to make sure that they love reading as much as you do. And neither one of those is going to be successful for a mindset of really enjoying storytelling and bonding.
Yeah.
So, what you actually need are storybooks, tangible. At this point, when they're young, they don't need the Kindle for the books. They need to hold and point
Yes.
to, and you hold one side and they hold the other, and you're sitting proximate to one another. Also, if they are like my son and they're not going to snuggle with you on the couch, they're running around you, you would be shocked how much they're still listening.
Sure.
Sometimes they just need to pair that kinesthetic movement with the auditory knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and they are still benefiting from it. So don't worry if they're not sitting with you on the couch. So you have the book, inevitably bonding is going to occur. Why? Because you have something tangible to talk about with one another. You're looking at the same thing. You can ask questions about the characters. Why do you think they did this? What does this facial expression mean? Have you ever felt that way? And you're going to have conversations about things that feel not just accessible,
Yeah.
but also safe, because it's not necessarily about, well, how was your day? What did you do at school? It was, oh, look, she looks like she's feeling left out on that. And then he might say, I know how that feels. So I felt left out today too. Which he might
Mm.
not otherwise have told you, but
Yeah.
it feels like it's not just him. He has a character to point to as well.
Right.
So on our, you mentioned on our Instagram Storybook Basics, what we do is we provide book recommendations that are quality books. We provide you with activities that you can do with it that are
Yeah.
very low prep and very easy to do.
Yeah.
We're not the artists like your ministry. We're not asking people to draw beautiful hands, but something that pairs well with the book,
Yeah.
and a snack that also goes with the book. And these are also things like, for example, if you read The Giving Tree, your snack are apple slices.
So fun.
It's fun and it's low prep and it's something you probably already have in your kitchen, but now you're pairing that experience together of eating with one
Hmm.
another with the book that you've just read. So you're furthering the bonding experience.
Yes.
We tell you the ideas that you might also share because of the themes of the book, and then we give you a connection question. So it's called Storybook Basics. Basic is the acronym for book, activity, snack,
Oh,
ideas, and connection.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So that's the gist of it. And it really just came from a place of wanting to authentically connect with my children and my
Yeah.
best friend, Kate, who's also on the account as well, so that she could connect with her girls and do it in a way that really slows down childhood and enjoys it.
Yeah. Which, gosh, nowadays I feel like it is so easy for kids to grow up really quick.
Yes.
Um, yeah. And so what a great thing. We're only kids for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and you are with the snack and the activity, you're activating the senses. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's not that there's anything wrong with a bedtime story that we go to bed, but to activate that, when they're teenagers and something happens that reminds them of the giving tree, which has a really good lesson in it. There's more than just the words that were said, but the apple that I ate and the activity that went with it because senses have been activated more than one. So I love that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're having so much fun with it, and
Good.
it takes out the guesswork too for the
Mhm.
caregivers. It's like, what book is good? What does it look like? What does it say? And I will challenge your listeners to open up a children's book and look at the words, because children's books, although they are considered simple, have so many high order vocabulary words.
Mm,
By that, I just mean any word that is not typical in your everyday lexicon.
yeah.
Like, you will see adverbs that you usually don't use, or three syllable words that you don't usually use, that are exposing your children not only to the words, but a context that makes sense for those words. And
Yep.
you don't even have to take the time to define them. You certainly can, but you don't even have to do that. The fact that you're exposing them to those words within a context that makes sense, they are going to glean what the meaning is from that story naturally and organically. So
Yep.
there's so many benefits to this very simple practice of reading together.
I love watching your reels where you'll have the book and then suddenly the words will pop up that show up in that book they're big words.
Mm-hmm.
Delightful. Gosh, I'm trying to think of ones I've seen, but I watch it and go, "Oh, yeah. That's a big vocabulary
Yes.
just
Yeah.
from that one book."
Yes. And there's a book that explains that if you make reading a common practice, not even saying like it has to be 30 minutes a day, just a common practice, whatever
Yeah.
that looks like in your household. By the time that they're 4 years old, you're going to be exposing them to more than 4 million words they
Wow.
otherwise would not get if they
Yeah.
were only exposed to everyday lexicon. Because actually, we don't use that many words in everyday talk to adults, let
No.
alone to children. We kind of repeat the same words. They're usually pretty low level vocabulary
Yeah.
words. But if you read these children's books, you're setting yourself up for success, not just for bonding, but also for academic success as well.
So good. Yeah, it's so true. And we get in our own verbiage and you hang out with the people. I mean, even, a spouse, and suddenly you take on each other's
Yeah.
verbiage a little bit. And so expanding that is great.
Yeah. So come on
Well,
over and hang out with us.
yeah, go there in the show notes, your Instagram makes it easy. Again, the taking the guesswork out because you could go to a bookstore. Yes, those still exist. In fact, I hear Barnes and Noble is like uh, opening 50 new stores because apparently bookstores have exploded on TikTok.
Yes, it's called Book Talk. on on TikTok, it's Book Talk, and yeah, they are becoming a marketing tool. And these youngsters actually want to go to a brick and mortar and hang out and talk about books. I think this is amazing.
That used to be the thing to do. Barnes and Noble was, okay, let's go on a date to Barnes and Noble.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and in a mall, actually
Oh,
go to a mall. Those
yep.
those might be getting a resurgence too, because people want to be around people. We
I
need
think
each other.
we do.
I
We
love it.
do.
I'm here
Yep.
for it.
So go check out Storybook Basics. If you want some new kids' books and ideas, connect with Erin. Uh, and tomorrow,
There's another book you should buy. The
if you
Unspoken
so
Word.
feel led, it
Yes,
will
no,
be
you're
available on Amazon. Next step is to put it in brick and mortar as well. But Amazon still is a big first step.
and tell everybody it matters to buy it
Mm,
when it first comes out, right?
it
Like, not
does. So the way Amazon, the social media, and not that that's social media, but the internet works in algorithms. And so buying, and if you feel led to leave a review within the first 7 days makes a big difference for it to then be known as as a book that Amazon pushes to the top.
Right.
So when you get those little orange flags on Amazon that say, bestseller or Amazon favorite, those matter too in its viewage for people. So, yes, it does make a difference. It is available now, low key, on Kindle, but yes, if that's how you prefer reading a book, great. I do suggest buying the physical book. There's a hard copy and a paperback. I would not just because I would suggest the hardback as well because part of the book has questions to answer, and there's even to activate the senses, like go into nature and do this thing. And
Yes.
so with a hardback, you've got a natural writing tool that is hard and makes it easier. But, anyways, yes, I would love it if you buy it. That'd be great.
Okay. So everybody buy tomorrow. You're going to buy the book and you're going to leave a review.
Yes,
And
be
then you're
great.
going to share it with all of your friends and you're going
Yes,
to have your small group buy them together and you're going to act them out and you're going to hear it into somebody else's voice.
yes.
It's going to come to life and you're going to love the Bible stories even more.
I'm excited.
Let's do it.
Yes, yeah, and tell me how it goes. The back
Mm,
has my website in it where you can email me. I love stories, so tell me how it goes.
perfect. Well,
Erin, you're the best. This is why it's important to have good friends around you, not just for moments like this, but cheerleaders are important in our life. This book would not have been accomplished without cheerleaders.
yes. Well, I'm just reminded of rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And I am
Mhm.
very glad that in this moment it is rejoicing
Yes.
with my good friend Angela, with her rejoicing over her new book. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, everybody, Erin's coming back in a few weeks, so Pontius Pilate, here we
Pontius
go.
Pilate. Here we go.
All right.
Thanks for
Bye,
having me.
friend.